is Merrill McBride, and I have the pleasure of serving as your host today. I want to welcome you to this edition of the VWEC Expert Series, in which we ask educational professionals to share their experiences and their insights into ways in which virtual worlds can be used to engage students. I am pleased to introduce today's guest presenter, Spiff Whitfield, aka Andrew Wheelock, who spent over 30 years in K-12 education in Western New York, over half of which were spent as a technology integrator. He is currently an instructional technology specialist for a small school in Western New York. In 2012, Spiff received a grant to create a history virtual world using Opensim. For the next 10 years, he worked with a team of educators to create the Islands of Enlightenment. These islands were dedicated to helping students in grades 6 through 12 learn by means of a virtual environment. The purpose of the presentation today is to explore the quote conquest and quote tragedies of this virtual world engagement and to ask the question of what can be done next. Please be advised that this presentation will be recorded and streamed on YouTube and will be fully captioned. Please see the instructions on the sign to my lower right that includes the URL. Feel free to post questions to chat during his talk, and we will collect them to be answered during our social time at the end of the hour. The co-host, Ellie, and I will monitor the chat for questions and comments. So, without further delay, I yield the floor to our guest, Spiff Whitfield.
Thank you so much, Merrill. Much appreciated. It's a nice introduction. My avatar, of course, doesn't look like I've been a 30-year plus educator, but I feel still vigorous, and I know many of you here are educators. You know the inspiration that come from kids kind of keep you young, I think. So I want to kind of give you hopefully a narrative that encompasses not only my experience as a student, but as a teacher and then a technology integrator, and then kind of ending my role here where I am now, and also perhaps an opportunity for some collaboration if any of you find what I'm telling you is interesting. So I will begin my story again as a student. And I remember the very first time I fell in love with history, and that was in 7th grade. And it's almost like, for those of you who have fallen in love with a person, it's just kind of the experience I had understanding falling in love with history. And again, I can remember the moment and the day. I may not remember the date precisely, but I just remember that moment where history kind of hit. And I knew that this was something that I would love for the rest of my life. And I feel, in all of my endeavors in education, I've tried to bring history into it. But so I was in 7th grade. And again, these were back in the days where you had kind of fire and brimstone history teachers. My history teacher in 7th grade would walk around with a yardstick, and if you weren't paying attention, he'd bring the yardstick down right in front of your right in front of your face, and the sound and the fury would wake everybody in the classroom up. So you paid attention. I can't say that's the best style of teaching, but you did pay attention in that class. But again, I'm dating myself with this reference, but I remember, the teacher coming out with the reel-to-reel projector, and I know many of you may have no idea what a reel-to-reel projector is, but basically it was like the old style film projector. And when a teacher rolled that in, they had to, plan in advance to bring that in. It was a special day, so students would always kind of perk up when that got rolled in, because you knew you were watching a movie. And he showed us, his seventh grade was U.S. history, and he showed us the Audie Murphy version of the Red Badge of Courage. And for those of you, again, who don't know who Audie Murphy was, he was a film star, but he was much more than that. He was actually a World War II veteran who signed on, I think, almost when he was 17 years old, and wound up in campaigns throughout Italy, and eventually wrote a book called To Hell and Back about his experiences. But he was young and good looking, and he became a film star when he came back. He actually starred in his own film, which would have been the life of his own film, as his own biography. But anyways, he was in this movie. It was the first time I'd seen him, and this was, again, a black and white, very rudimentary, you know, film for its day, but it also, I think, captured the essence of a Civil War battlefield. And again, for those of you who probably haven't read the story, or maybe you have, but it was really a story about a young soldier, and when he goes to war, he gets very scared the first time and runs. He eventually ends up like falling back in with his troops, them not realizing that he is run, and he kind of gets back in the fold, but also, embarrassed that he ran during the heart of battle. And, by the end of it, you see that he, has a dose of redemption. But let me just filter my slideshow here so you can see who Audie Murphy was. If you want some more information about this presentation, you can go to, I think, the Islands OE. The middle one will will showcase a lot of the work that I did. But there's also the Virtual Pioneers, which I'll talk about. And if you're interested in just my work in general, you can go to the Coffee with a Geek link at the bottom. Also, I believe Roxy is here. I'm going to be writing a companion piece to this presentation in the latest issue of VEG. So if this is a presentation you'd like, I kind of put it out in a written form, and it'll be in the next issue, I believe, of VEG. Here is a picture of Audie Murphy on the right. You can see, again, black and white, and I believe this is a photo from the film. And again, it was that moment in that class, and there was something about that movie, and I think the content, because I think all of us probably wonder, like, what we do in the heart of a battle, right? When there's bombs and explosions around, what kind of person, what kind of courage do we have at that moment? And I think, again, for me, I felt like I'd do exactly what Audie Murphy did, which is why I think the story connected with me. I think I'd be scared to death, and I'd probably try to run, but hoping that, of course, that in time you could kind of gain the courage of a soldier. But again, that movie for somehow just captured my attention like no other movie, because, again, even though it was kind of rudimentary for its day, or for our day, I guess for its time, it was probably pretty state-of-the-art filmmaking. But for some reason, it got me inside the film, if that makes sense. And I think for those of us who love history, you have to have that moment, right, where you see inside from your own mind's eye. You dig into the character so deep that you feel the history around you. And so to me, history has always been, and I think for those of us who love history, we can easily transition to that visual space that we feel like we're integrated in it. And I think, there's some people maybe that don't. Again, I can't speak for them because it's hard for me to relate, but I'm guessing sometimes us kind of visual learners really can dig into that. But again, a good, compelling narrative is the key, in that the book and the movie, I think, were fascinating. So if I could fast forward a little bit, like after that, again, as a student, I just loved history. It was my favorite subject. I got A's in it all throughout high school, took some courses in college, and same thing. I really latched on to any history course I could, enjoyed it, and got good grades in them. And then when I became a teacher, I thought, wow, this is my chance, right? This is my chance to relay what I've learned in history to my students. And I was an elementary teacher for 13 years. And again, I was a fourth grade and fifth grade teacher mostly. I had a couple different stints in some different things, including a Seneca culture and history course, which was all about the Seneca nation, which is a local Native American nation close to me. But that's a story for another day. But I thought like just my passion alone could bring the students into my, love of history. And of course, my generation was all about, books and the occasional reel to reel movie. So like when I tried translating to the kids in the 2000s and the 90s, they were starting to be more visual, kids, visual learners. And I was missing the mark when I was teaching my history because I was thinking the story alone would bring them in, not really remembering that what me brought into it was the visual piece, the movie piece to it. And when, again, when I first started teaching, we were still using textbooks and notebooks and paper. And when, the kids would read these history, texts, inevitably, and it would hurt my feelings because they would say history is boring, social studies is boring. I'm like, wow, like why, how could they say that? I mean, because I had the passion for it, I had the knowledge for it, but I wasn't translating history to them for some reason, because again, it wasn't every kid, but there were enough kids that it started making me think like there's something I'm missing when I'm trying to translate history to a new generation. And textbooks certainly weren't doing that. So when I got my job as a tech integrator, it's a place called Erie Wimbosies, and that's a shared service model. So we would go to a lot of different schools and help teachers with their technology. So it was a really dynamic and fast-paced environment. And I had thought of this idea, and actually it was here in Second Life. My boss at the time, my first boss there said, hey guys, there's a Second Life virtual environment, go check it out, see what it's all about. And, when I came into it, I was like, oh, this is just gaming, without the game, right? And then when I got here, I was in Second Life, I was just amazed. And there were so many, for those of you who remember this, I think I've been in here 18 years. The early days of Second Life, there were a lot of historical builds. There was Land of Lincoln, which was all about Abraham Lincoln. There was, Renaissance Island, which I believe is still around. And it just captured my imagination. And what I loved about it is it captured that visual piece that I was missing, right? And then I wanted to try and get my students to see, because that's what brought me into loving history. It was the visual piece, to being able to immerse myself into it. And I saw this as just such an amazing possibilities of having history, to be able to look through history. And again, you don't get fooled that you're actually in, an ancient Colosseum, but you get the expanse and you get the, just the, I want to say, I guess perspective, that's the word I'm looking for, the perspective of history. And I think, again, early on in history, they had what's the famous chapel, the Sistine Chapel. And they had a recreation of the Sistine Chapel. And, again, I probably will never get to see the Sistine Chapel, but this gave me at least that experience of walking through the doors and being able to look up at that amazing artwork. So, that really got me thinking, like, Second Life has such huge potential. Second Life started with the Teen Grid. And of course, for those of you, again, remember, we're going way back, like Teen Grid, all of a sudden vanished. And we're like, how did that happen? And again, there was so much possibility and potential there. So I thought, like, there's a great idea here. How can I take the coolness of Second Life and that potential to create a history sim? And then I think, again, early on, the U.S. Memorial Holocaust Museum created their Holocaust Museum here in Second Life, which is still around. So if you've never seen it, please go see it. It's kind of a retrospective on Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass. And that was kind of the final piece of the straw for me of an idea of how to do this. So being in the position I was in, which was a technology integrator, and being able to go to a variety of different schools, I applied for a grant through New York State Department of Education, and I got it. I couldn't believe I got it, but I was so happy because I worked so hard. If for those of you who have written a grant, a good grant with big money, they want a really nice grant. You gotta pull out all the stops, and you gotta like basically give up your soul to it, I guess, for lack of a better term. That's the only way I could think of it. I just remember I was actually sick. Like the grant was due, it was crunch time for the grant, and I was sick as a dog. And I just remember like working so hard through that. That's how much I can remember this. And that grant was probably, I think, 2012. So we're going back quite a ways. But anyway, so I wrote the grant, I got the grant, I was amazed by it. And with the grant came technology, because of course, to do virtual worlds, you need the technology, and it gave me money to pay teachers for training. So it was a 3-year grant, and it was my golden opportunity. So with my work, they got a lot of really smart tech guys. We were able to get Opensim on our server. We downloaded it. We, worked out all the kinks, and believe me, there were kinks involved to do Opensim, and do it yourself on a server when you have no idea what you're doing. And the tech guys know a lot of what they're doing, but this is new to them too. So we went through a lot of bumps and bruises, and just the funniest, it's not even a funny story because it was so frustrating at the time, but I can look at it and kind of laugh and smile now, is that the Opensim kept crashing on us, and we could not figure out. So the kids would come in, they'd have like 5 minutes, they'd get all excited and crash. It would go out. And then, we tried just doing like, okay, let's do it in small groups, only 5 kids at a time. And we couldn't figure out what it was that kept crashing it. And then we finally figured it out. It was voice. We had enabled voice, but we didn't really want kids to use voice because we wanted kids to type. So it was the voice piece that was causing the sim to crash. So once we disabled voice, it worked great, and we hardly had any crashes from that point on. And that was kind of the golden ticket. But how are we to know, right? I mean, we just, there were so many variables doing it yourself that, it finally hit like, hey, it looks like this voice is taking a lot of oxygen out of the open environment. And so that was the secret. So anyways, we were able to create it, and that became the Islands of Enlightenment. And because I saw the Holocaust Museum here, and I thought back to my own, again, social studies days, I remember reading the diary of Anne Frank, the diary of a young girl, Anne Frank. And her story, of course, is so compelling. But, the one thing I couldn't wrap my head around when I read the book is, how do you hide like that? What does this annex really look like? And Anne was a wonderful writer, but yet it was very difficult to understand how that annex looked so that nobody could see it. I mean, you're in the middle of Amsterdam. How does nobody see, a group of people living in a in a housing complex or in a business, behind a business? So that was our goal. So we recreated it with some great help from some great Second Life people. One of them being Serena Off Course. I know many of you know Serena, and she was kind of my project partner. We both believed in it, and we got some other people involved that were builders and creators, and they helped. They just helped. And that was the wonderful thing about this group that we're in front of right here. This VWEC are those same passionate people that are always willing to help and give for free, for a great story. So we created the kind of Anne Frank project, and you can see in the pictures, the top picture is a picture of Anne's desk. So we really create the annex. Then you see the bottom picture, the bottom left, that was a reflection area that the kids that we had created, and similar to the U.S. Holocaust Museum in real life. And again, we were worried about this one in a sense that when we created it, we didn't want the kids to think of the story of Anne Frank as a game or the Holocaust as a game. We were worried about how the kids would perceive that. So we wanted to make sure in that reflection area, you can see all the candles around the reflection area. The kids embedded an essay into each one of those candles so that when you click on it, their essay opens up. And that's where we knew, like, yes, the kids got it. They didn't think of Anne's story or the Holocaust as a game, because the powerful writing that we got within those candles showed us that they understood. They understood, and it wasn't a game to them. And that was fabulous. And I always loved it as we did it over the years, and we did the project, we'd build more and more candles around and more stories develop. So it's a great project there. And then the final kind of, if you look at the bottom right picture there, we created what was called our virtual Holocaust museum, where each kid was given a space. And I mean, some kids could just create a slideshow presentation about something they learned or about the Holocaust. Other kids actually started creating airplanes, and some kids were actually created like trains. They were creating fires. They were really becoming builders. And that was, again, a learning piece for us as educators, that wow, these kids have a passion for building. And, I won't lie, some kids did some inappropriate builds. Some kids did put blocks where they shouldn't have put blocks, and we had to address that. But it was really, again, a magical thing to see kids build and have a passion for it. So the next year of the grant, again, it's a 3-year grant, we did what was called the Heir of the King project. And we wanted to take kind of, medieval time period learning history, but we also combined it with like an Arthurian type of mystery. So we kind of put it as a kind of like, King Arthur, like a young child was taken away from being the rightful heir to the throne, raised away from the castle, and then it's up to the kids to figure out who it is, and they get clues along the way. And I had a great teacher, Mary Howard, who helped me with this. She was, I call her the curriculum whisperer. She just did a great job of gamifying this whole process, so the kids kind of leveled up as they went, and they went from kind of serf to noble person throughout the game. We had just tons of built-in levels, and again, it's teaching is never about just one person. And with the help of Mary and all the other teachers, and again, Serena helped with some of the building. We had another guy just build a castle for us from Second Life, and I'm sad to say he passed away not long after the project, and I only remember his I think Second Life name, which was Samson Garbucks, I think. Again, he did the castle. He built the castle for us, like in Opensim. So amazing tribute, I think, to just what education is all about, and just people willing to contribute their talents for a great project. Then again, you can kind of see the different pieces that we have here. There's, the King's Chambers, Medieval Marketplace. We had different characters. I even involved our local college here, the University of Buffalo, Buff State, different college. Sounds similar, but different. And they had a drama department, and they actually played out the characters for us and did the voice work for it. So that was really fun to get that piece involved as well. And then the third year, so kind of the last year of the grant funding, was what we called the Building by Design project. I live near Buffalo, New York, and we are home to one of Frank Lloyd Wright's amazing pieces of architecture, which is the Darwin Martin House. It's called the Martin House here as their affiliation, but it's an amazing home. If you're ever in Buffalo, please go, and it's well worth your time to go see it. Not far from there, maybe 45-minute drive down the lake, is Grey Cliff, also Frank Lloyd Wright, built for Darwin Martins as a vacation home, just architectural masterpieces. And I think you really love it. So if you're in Buffalo, Frank Lloyd Wright had a huge stamp on the architecture there. But so we took the kids to the Darwin Martin house, of course, showed them Frank Lloyd Wright's home, talked about Darwin Martin, who was a rags to riches to rags story. Actually, he was very poor growing up, became a salesman for a soap company called the Larkin Soap Company, and made his way, the American way, up the ladder of success to becoming one of the presidents of the soap company, and became a millionaire. And he hired Frank Lloyd Wright to build this house. As he was close to death, he lost everything in the stock market, or close to everything. So the home stood vacant. Basically, his wife walked out of the door and left the door open. And she found a place to live with her sister, but the house was left vacant for almost 20 years. Incredible story, but I could spend a lot more time on that. But the kids got the history, they got the visual effect of this, and then they went and built their own kind of Frank Lloyd Wright style home. And the pictures and the work and the fun that the kids had were just incredible. And just a joy to see all of these projects come to life. So after year 3, the grant was over. I applied for the grant again, but they changed the criteria of the grant and opened and expanded it beyond, opened basically it up to a lot of different entities. And I didn't get the grant the second time. Luckily, my work was very supportive of the project, so we were still able to carry on with the projects and do teacher staff development, but we weren't able to provide schools with the technology to do that. So again, we're talking about a section of time here. We started to see a drop off in schools wanting to sign on to it because it was a lot of work. They weren't going to get technology for it. They were going to get PD for it, but it was a big learning curve for teachers. And so we started to see it kind of falter as far as the participation. But we also saw this was kind of the time when Chromebooks came on the scene. And, again, I see it now in my role as a technology director where you're having to deal with money. And at the time, again, I'm just kind of throwing kind of ballpark figures, but when the Chromebook came on the market, it was like $200 per device, whereas the other devices are iPads or computers, and those were, let's just say, $600 to $800 at that time period. So if you're a district that's tight on funds, what are you going to go with? You're going to go with the easy option, which was the easy and cheap option, which was Chromebooks. Chromebooks wouldn't run any of this. So that was probably the biggest pin in the balloon, was seeing Chromebooks come into schools. They were getting rid of desktop labs. All of those were being taken out, and Chromebooks were flooding the scene. Again, I'm not blaming anybody per se, but it really undercut a lot of innovative technology when Chromebooks came along. And am I resentful of that? A little bit. I won't lie. I'm not going to lie. I was resentful of it because I think Chromebooks, even to this day, are very limiting for what you can do innovatively. I still believe more in an iPad or a full bore computer for kids. And even I would love the days where we could have computer labs that have high powered graphics that could power this. But the reality is, with budgets of what they were, here's how that rolled out. So we're talking probably a 10-year span. I had huge conquests, meaning we had these great projects that we pulled to life. But we had really the tragedy of we were really reliant on grants. And once those grants dry up, or you don't get that grant, that money is hard to make up for most school districts and even an entity like I was working at. So that was a tragedy. We also had, the learning curve that it takes to do a virtual world really takes a teacher that's got some gumption and dare I say even courage to do something above and beyond it, to learn it and to do that. The last group of teachers I worked with were from Cleve Hill, and they were just amazing. They still were working on the Anne Frank project and doing new things in it. And so we're really kind of, when I got my new job, I had to leave this project behind. So you can see, I think, hopefully the blend of Conquest, some really great stuff that happened, and then some kind of tragedies that happened to where it is now, where it's really kind of at a standstill. So let me just kind of review. So these are kind of our conquests here, right? So what worked with these projects? We found that the students did increase learning. So with the grant, you have I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the grant process. You usually have a grant reviewer, and the grant reviewer comes and says, hey, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Are you spending the money the way you're supposed to be spending it? So she actually did the work of testing the kids and finding the data from the years before when they didn't do the virtual world versus when they did do the virtual world. So she did that for all 3 years. We found in each case the learning and the achievement increased. So we had the data to say that, look, at virtual worlds are providing a better way for kids to learn this history. And I believe it. And again, I believe it from the Red Badge of Courage. Me watching that video, I got a much better sense for what the Civil War was about, for what history was about, because I was able to, again, immerse myself a little bit in it. So we saw increased student learning. We saw increased student engagement. And for any of you here who've worked with young kids on even Minecraft or any of those Roblox, but if you can bring that to school, I mean, we always used to, like, every teacher that did this, we'd say, like, wait till you see your kids in here, and you will see a whole different side to your kid, your students. They will be totally different. They will be immersed in a way you've never seen them before. They will help each other out. Yes, they will be goofy. There's going to be that first day where you have to let them be goofy and fly and bump into people and, you know, say weird things in local chat. But again, the engagement that you'll see out of students is amazing. And they're going to look forward to it. I mean, they're going to be there. They're not going to show up. They're not going to be sick those days. They're going to be there for that. So those are two, again, huge conquests. Teacher professional development, again, was key to, like, see teachers actually be a little silly sometimes and see teachers get engaged. And yeah, even see teachers get a little frustrated by the technology, but see them work through it. I mean, that's the important part, right? Like, again, we had a lot of teachers that were frustrated, and once you get in with kids, though, the kids will actually help the teacher out. Again, and that's a beautiful experience that you will not see in so many other ways. So, and then the content that we got of the teachers from, Amanda and Jay at Cleve Hill, and from Mary Howard, like, these teachers that just embraced the project and created content in it was above and beyond just like magical. And then, and what I loved, and again, this goes to that kind of fighting through challenges, is we really developed, I know probably you've heard this to a point of, it's not so fun to hear anymore, but the growth mindset of being able to work through obstacles and having that grit in a technology sense. To me, you saw it from the teachers, like those teachers who truly embraced it, like, they stuck with it and they felt a sense of pride that they probably haven't seen. Again, let's face it, when you're teaching day to day, you get used to kind of writing the lesson plan to a point where you don't even need to write the lesson plan, right? You just got so many tools in your toolbox. This was expanding their toolbox even more. So there were huge successes there. For me personally, I learned what servers are all about, or at least, again, some of that. I learned a lot of the background technology stuff. You kind of had to learn that. You learn the complexities of what a virtual world can be. There was so much learning that I had to do, and just motivating a team, like keeping teachers motivated, and also grant writing. I mean, grant writing is a bear, but it's like when you write it and it comes to fruition, it's pretty empowering. It's a pretty fun experience. And it's also very crushing when you put in a lot of time and energy to a grant and you don't get one. And you're basically at the mercy of a grant reviewer. So what were the challenges, or kind of our tragedies, to keep my analogy going? So money, of course, is just that, and maybe it's, there are some districts in my area that are wealthier that can have big budgets, and support bigger things. But interestingly, it wasn't those districts that signed on to this. Signed on to this project. It was the districts that really needed, that didn't have a lot of fun. We had a lot of Catholic schools. It was open to a lot of the Catholic private schools, and they jumped onto it because they don't have technology. They were able to get some technology to use. So it was a win-win situation in that case. PD for teachers, again, there's a huge learning curve when dealing with virtual worlds. Plus, there's that reluctance, a lot of teachers, this isn't their first jam. A lot of teachers aren't gamers. They didn't have this. The immersive experience creates a fear in them. So there was that. So those were tragedies. Creating content, of course, is very time consuming. All of this in Opensim, we had to create ourselves. I mean, we weren't buying it on a marketplace. We were creating it. And again, is it fun? Yes, it's incredibly fun, but it's also time consuming. And, we all have lives. And again, the biggest tragedy to me, again, was Chromebooks. And again, I get it. I get why districts went with them, but I think they sucked the life out of a lot of innovation, a lot of innovative products. And, again, those labs that we used to have with great graphics that the kids could do some higher end learning just are dried up, at least again, and from my experience and in my area. So those were our challenges or tragedies. And I will tell you just this is kind of maybe a funny one, is one of the big challenges that we had to do, especially with this being, we worked with kids specifically, grades basically 8 through 12. So they're older kids, they're over 13-year-old kids, but the wardrobe malfunctions in Opensim were our biggest challenges because we did have a school early on that did a virtual world thing, and all it took was for one kid to yell the word naked in school, and the whole thing got shut down because a parent complained and that sort of thing. So we had to spend a lot of time making sure that the wardrobe malfunctions were as minimized as possible. So someone gave me a t-shirt when I first came into Second Life and it said, "I see gray people." And for those of you who remember Second Life in its earliest days, that you probably will get a chuckle out of it. I always loved that t-shirt because nobody understood what it was about except for us Second Lifers. So, and again, but we spent a lot of time because basically with Opensim, when you download it to your server, it comes with, the adult level skins in the library, and you basically have to get rid of those, make sure the kids only have access to, your paper doll, underwear and t-shirt skins for underneath. And that takes a lot of time. And of course, some kid removes all their clothes, and yes, even though they just have the t-shirt and underwear on, some kid's going to yell out, "Oh, so-and-so's naked," or something like that. And again, all heck breaks loose, and you just pray to God that a kid doesn't go home and tell that to their parents, so it shuts the whole thing down. But it was a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal, and I know, it was just one of the challenges that we took, and it made for a lot more work than probably was needed to be. And so I wish there was an easier way in Opensim to prevent that. But so here's, to wrap things up, here's my hope is from this experience. And again, in the end, this project is no longer going, for lack of a better term. It was awesome during its time. It was great. I learned a ton. I think the potential surely showed that this could be something powerful and done. So how can we do that? And so I think, in my opinion, how could we do this? These are my hopes for the future, is that, these gaming companies are producing a lot of historical content, incredible builds. And of course, there is a lot of embedded history in those gaming, but I think a lot of times, especially recent games, they've really taken the historical narratives to a point where they're rewriting history, and I think in some pretty, I guess, for lack of a better term, immoral ways. And I'll give you a quick example. Assassin's Creed 3 has this historical figure in it William Johnson, who's a real world historical figure, and they turn him into this villainous person. And it's taking a real world historical figure and you're basically assassinating their character. And I don't believe that's right. I just don't. As a history person, it's not to say that historical characters can't be criticized or even taken out of their time zone to see them, but you shouldn't change who they were and their history. I know it's to serve a narrative, but you're ruining somebody's reputation, and they can't defend themselves, of course, because they're long gone. But I don't think that's right, to be honest with you. And gaming companies, I think, have taken a lot of liberties on those particular cases. And it bothers me as a teacher because kids are getting the wrong history, purely made up history. And they'll believe a lot of times what they've seen at first, right? So again, that's a story for another day, and it's a little pressure point for me. But again, these gaming companies, back to my larger point, is they have a lot of historical content. Why aren't any of them turning around and saying, hey, we've done this amazing build. Let's make a historical thing just for kids. And let's look at what Microsoft did with Minecraft. They created an educational entity that's powerful, that's both provides a building experience as well as a gaming experience, as well as an educational piece. I mean, they've done it. Like and again, I'm not really criticizing Microsoft for this, but again, for those of us who are in Second Life and we see the amazing builds, I mean, the blocky atmosphere of Minecraft to me is, I can't, it's very difficult for me to appreciate it because it's just so clumsy and blocky. But again, kids love it. So I'm not criticizing that in a sense at all. And when I talked about the wardrobe malfunctions, at least Minecraft doesn't have to worry about the wardrobe malfunctions. But you see what Microsoft did with Minecraft. You see what the gaming companies can do with high-tech virtualizations. Why can't those two entities come together and create something that's affordable for schools that could be high-powered learning? I wish, that's my hope. That's my wish. I also wish that we could decompress the curriculum in schools. I know this is just a New York State thing, but I doubt it. Teachers don't have time to do a lot of high-end projects because their curriculum is their plate is full. And as the late great Pee Wee Herman said, everybody's got a big butt, in education, because you'd say like, yeah, Andy, I'd love to do this, but I don't have time. I've got to get ready for this test. I'm behind in my curriculum, Andy, I'd love to do this in math class and do something different, but I've got to get ready for this test. I've got to do this, it's a big problem. I know in New York State education, the plate of a teacher gets filled to a point where they can't even entertain the idea of doing something that's going to take 2 weeks to develop and do. They can't do it. It's a non-starter in most cases. And again, I think the possibilities, if we could break those two things, I think these could grow. These projects will work if we could get through that. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Just to let you know, I am part of a group called the Virtual Pioneers. We've kind of fallen off in a lot of what we do. We used to do a lot of tours here in Second Life. I know many of the people that are part of this have been to some of our meetings. We've had kind of a change in a lot of our people have, just found different things to do. But if you're interested in being a part of Virtual Pioneers and want to, be a part of the group, I'd love to have you. I'd love to talk to you. And if you're interested in helping set up some tours, there is the very real problem of there's not as many historical builds now as there used to be. So there is that. So again, but I think there's certainly the potential to do some history type learning here. And so again, if anyone is interested in doing some Second Life virtual world stuff, I'd be happy to work with you and talk with you about that. And if there's anybody who wants to try any Opensim thing, I can lend you my experience and who to talk to get all this stuff going. But there is my history in a virtual world. I wish I had better news at the end. I wish I could say there's cool projects coming, but that's where we're at. So again, thank you for coming, and I will entertain questions.
Actually, let me say a few words, beginning with a great thank you to Spiff for his presentation. And many of us share your pain about the way institutional support waxes and wanes regarding these types of projects. I can relate to that personally. Um, his Spiff's
Thanks,
slides will
everybody.
be available on the
Thanks for the
slides and
compliments.
information wall behind us and to my right. It's now time to adjourn to the deck at the back of the venue to address questions captured in the chat and to discuss any other questions and comments that people may have. Before we do that, however, please note that the next installment of the VWEC Expert Series will be on October 24th, 1 o'clock p.m. SLT, at which time we examine learning in the metaverse, pedagogies, platforms, and potentials as presented by Coro Mosley. So mark your calendars, everybody. Finally, you can find links to our in-world calendar and related helpful information on the material that I will add to the text shortly. And we can be reached through a variety of media. Once again, please see the text that I will share with you here in a couple of minutes. Please join me as we adjourn to our social space at the back deck, where you can imbibe in all sorts of alcoholic non-intoxicants and indulge your sweet tooth with calorie and sugar-free sweets. My favorite destination in Second Life, to be sure. For the moment, we stand adjourned. Have a great weekend, everybody, and thank you again, Spiff.
Thank you, everybody. Great to see all of you. And I'm happy to answer any questions in the back there.